أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين سبقت لهم منا الحسنى أولئك عنها مبعدون. لا يسمعون حسيسها وهم فيما اشتهت أنفسهم خالدون. لا يحزنهم الفزع الأكبر وتتلقاهم الملائكة هذا يومكم الذي كنتم توعدون. يوم نطوي السماء كطي السجل للكتب كما بدأنا أول خلق نعيده. يوم نطوي السماء كطي السجل للكتب كما بدأنا أول خلق نعيده. وعدا علينا إنا كنا فاعلين. ولقد كتبنا في الزبور من بعد الذكر أن الأرض يرثها عبادي الصالحون. إن في هذا لبلاغا لقوم عابدين. وما أرسلناك إلا رحمة للعالمين. قل إنما يوحى إلي أنما فهل أنتم مسلمون فإن تولوا فقل آذنتكم على سواء وإن أدري أقريب أم بعيد ما توعدون إنه يعلم الجهر من القول ويعلم ما تكتمون وإن أدري لعله فتنة لكم ومتاع إلى حين قال رب احكم بالحق قال رب احكم بالحق وربنا الرحمن المستعان على ما تصفون قال رب احكم بالحق وربنا الرحمن المستعان على ما تصفون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Assalamu alaikum, respected viewers, and thank you for joining us for our annual Ramadan Wake-a-Thon. Thank you to Brother Mahmoud Sarobi for that beautiful Quran recitation to start our event tonight. Unfortunately, we're having yet another virtual Wake-a-Thon, but we hope you can all still enjoy and benefit from tonight's program. Inshallah, you're all having a good month of Ramadan. We hope all your prayers, fasts, amal, and du'as are accepted. This holy month, we've been blessed to be joined virtually by Shaykh Rastani for several lectures and classes, and tonight you'll be able to ask him your questions. Our topics tonight include making the best out of the remainder of this holy month and how to transition out of this month, with a lecture by Sayyid Hussein Makke and a short talk by Shaykh Rastani. This will be followed by Q&A, a Kahoot trivia game, and the Munajat of Imam Ali alayhi salam. You can submit your questions for Shaykh Rastani at tinyurl.com/acequestions. We'll start with the questions relating to Shaykh's Ramadan lectures and then move to the more general ones. For the Kahoot game, you'll need to open a separate browser and go to kahoot.it. We'll provide the game code later on. The questions will be based on Shaykh Mahdi's Ramadan lectures as well as general trivia. Please register at tinyurl.com/acegame in order to be eligible for a prize. Registration is not required to play the game, but if you'd like to win a prize, you must register. As it is recommended to spend these nights in dua and prayer, we will end the night with the recitation of the beautiful Munajat of Imam Ali alayhi salam by Brother Bilal Hashimi. A reminder they can still take part in our important causes this holy month by donating towards our Ramadan food drive as well as the ACIC Afghanistan fundraiser. Please visit tinyurl.com/AceRamadan2021 for more details, and Jazakallah in advance for your support. I'd now like to present Sayyid Hussein Makke.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم اخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا باب رحمتك وانشر علينا من خزائن علومك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. My brothers and my sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we approach these final blessed days of Shahr Ramadan, and we are about to embark on the journey for the rest of the year, then we will be tested in did we actually ascend spiritually to the point that we should have in this month, so that we have a treasure chest of spiritual energy that we can use to keep us moving forward and keep us ascending. We want this fitrah, this heart, this core of the human being to be revived, to be truly alive for the rest of the year. Because we know that on that day, يوم لا ينفع مال ولا بنون إلا من أتى الله بقلب سليم. On that day, nothing will benefit man except he who has come to meet Allah with a sound heart. Not the amount of wealth that you accumulate and not the amount of children that you have. Most of our time is spent on accumulating wealth. Most of our time is spent on building our families, and these are good things. Inshallah, Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves for us to have these things in His way, but never at the expense of the heart. We want to have a sound heart, a heart that is free of blemishes, a heart that's moving towards Him. No matter what happens, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells insan, إِنَّكَ كَادِحٌ إِلَى رَبِّكَ كَدْحًا فَمُلَاقِيهِ. You are going to meet Allah. No matter what you do, O insan, you are moving towards your Lord and you will inevitably meet Him. So, Allah gives us these very special times like Shahr Ramadan, where we have an opportunity to revive this fitrah. And after Laylatul Qadr, usually people, they begin to calm down. Actually, what you need to do is put even more effort and more energy towards the end of the month as Eid approaches to make sure that you hit the ground running afterwards. And what we want to do, we want to build upon what we have learned and what we have applied in this month so that it becomes a malaka. What is a malaka? Let me explain. So, first, when we come to perform any action, we go through what is called a amaliya fikriya. We go through a thought process. This thought process happens in stages of milliseconds. We don't think about it, but in the actual time frame, we are going through a thought process. So for example, I want to drink some water. Let's say the first thing is I acknowledge my thirst. I have ilm. I have knowledge of my thirst, that I'm thirsty and my thirst needs to be quenched. Then I go through a process of tafkir, of thinking. It's a very short process, but it's happening. We don't think about it. Sometimes it's longer. I'll explain that in a moment. So I think, should I get up to get water or not? The water's in the fridge. Should I do it or not? Once I decide that I want it, then I develop something called Shaykh. Now I want to drink that water. When I want to drink the water and I decide to get up, this is what you call irada. Then I'll get up, open the fridge, and drink that water and quench my thirst. This is a very quick version of the mental thought process that all of us go through when we want to commit to any action. Like even when I came to make this lecture for you. So, this is the usual thought process, the usual amaliya fikriya. It can happen slow, it can happen fast. For example, a young man wants to get married. He has now knowledge of his need of a spouse. He acknowledged it. He goes through the tafkir process. He thinks about it now. If he decides that he wants to go through with it, he develops shawk, and then he has to go and actually make it happen, tanfidh and irada, and go and find a suitable spouse. If he decides that he doesn't, it stops right there. This is the usual thought process that all people go through. Except there comes a time when we perform an action long enough and repeat it so many times that it becomes second nature. And it becomes something called malaka, which you may call mastery or a habit in English. Malaka, we want to develop right now a spiritual malaka. A normal malaka replaces the amaliya fikriya. No longer do you go through tafkir, no longer do you go through the mental process. When you first learned how to drive, you would get into your car, you'd look into the mirrors, put your seatbelt on, remember how to pull out, drive. So many things are happening in this short amount of time, and you're worried. But after a few months, when you get into the car, you just turn the keys and you begin to drive. Because you developed a malaka for driving. It became second nature to you. It became a habit to you. With your handwriting, it's the same thing. When you are writing, I don't have to remind you how to write and how to spell your letters. You know how to do it, or how to walk. Once upon a time, you had a hard time walking, and then you developed it as a malaka. God forbid we develop spiritual diseases as a malaka. For example, when someone gets angry, as soon as they are ticked off, as soon as they are provoked, they begin to shout, or they are violent. And when they calm down, they might be a good person. They say, oh, I wish I didn't do that. What was I thinking? Yes, you weren't thinking, because you developed a malaka. You developed a habit. You unfortunately now have the malaka of ghadab, of anger, or the malaka of shahwa, of desire. This is a dangerous malaka to have. This can cause us many problems when one now has an addiction towards their desires, towards their anger. This brings their fitrah to die. The fitrah dies in this way because these two faculties of the self, of the one nafs, these two faculties can take over the aql. They can take over the intellect. The intellect is supposed to guide the fitrah. The fitrah loves and is attracted, but it cannot differentiate to which path it is going. The aql is that which differentiates. But the shahwa and the ghadab, the desire and the anger, can take over, and they can take one's fitrah and one's movement to a place that is not godly. So when you move to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on that day, then you would not be meeting Him with a sound heart. What we want to do is we want to develop good habits, a malaka, a spiritual type of mastery that will allow us to keep moving forward after Ramadan, that we can rely on. Through enough practice, it becomes second nature to us. George Leonard, in his book Mastery, speaks about 3 different types of people. He speaks about the master, the dabbler, and the hacker. And he differentiates between the master and the dabbler. What does he say about them? He says that the master is the one who, when he is performing a certain action, and this can happen through sports, through spirituality, through any field of work, any hobby, whatever it may be, he says that, he uses tennis as the example. He says that first the person begins to train, then they begin to progress. They learn the flick of the wrist, they learn how to move on their feet, they learn how to get their cardio into working with them. At a certain point, 5-6 weeks into their progress, they hit a plateau. Okay? They stop progressing. They would be progressing so much in a quick period of time, but then suddenly they stop moving forward. Now, what the master does is they persist and they persevere and they push through it. They keep pushing. They might find a new technique. They might find a different way to get to their ends. Different means same ends. They continue now. They get better at tennis once again. And maybe a few months into it once again, and they hit another plateau. Likewise, they change their techniques and they keep going, and then they master whatever it is that they're practicing. They develop it into a malaka. The dabbler, on the other hand, they have the same beginning as the master. But they get to a place where when the plateau occurs, they give up. They dabble from one thing to the next. They get a good job. Mom, Dad, I have a new job now. I'm going to climb the ladder. I'm going to commit. I'm going to stick to this one. 6 weeks down the line, doesn't go well. You leave. You start a new job. Mom, Dad, once again, you do the same thing. Tennis didn't work out. You try football. Football didn't work out. You try basketball. You're always dabbling, right? When they say jack of all trades, master of none, that's the dabbler. It's the honeymoon person, the one who loves you. And then you get into an argument and then they move on, they love someone else, right? They're in love with the honeymoon. So this person is not a very reliable person. The hacker is the one who they're just accepting of their mundane level of whatever it is that they are in, whatever it is they've committed their lives to. So if their relationship is no good, khalas, alhamdulillah, it is what it is. You see, we want to be masters, spiritual masters. My brothers and sisters, most of us are spiritual dabblers. We dabble a lot with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We move from one thing to the next, from one thing to the next, never sticking to it. We say, okay, Shahr Ramadan worked out, Quran or Salatul Layl. I'm going to pray Salatul Layl, I'm going to wake up at night time, I want to progress towards Allah. High aim. You wake up before Fajr. You pray Salatul Layl on Monday. You wake up on Tuesday. You just about get Fajr on time. You wake up on Wednesday. You know what, today let me read Quran instead. Quran's good, I haven't read Quran. Let me read Quran. Boom. Then you go back to your Fajr prayer. Thursday, you wake up, you don't make it in time. You read only the Witr prayer, but you don't read the Quran. You read Fajr. You see, you're dabbling. And then by the weekend, you stop praying Salatul Layl. You're just like, you know what, it's not for me. We start really high and then we break ourselves. So what we need to do is take something small. Begin with something very small and do it every single day. Okay? If I have a table that is dirty, if I hose it only once a year and it's super clean, it will get dusty a few days later. And I have to wait till the next year to hose it again. Let me get a small cloth and wipe it a little bit from different angles every single day. Laylatul Qadr, we put all our effort in. We read Dua Jawshan al-Kabir. We read Dua Abu Hamza al-Thamali. We read all these du'as. We put all our effort in. And then we don't do anything for the rest of the year. It's much better to just reflect on Laylatul Qadr and then keep doing it for the rest of the year. If you're going to choose one. Of course, what we prefer is if we do all those a'mal, the very important a'mal, and we continue to move towards Allah with small a'mal throughout the year. What I would recommend is take something small, like Tasbih al-Zahra. Right, that's it. Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah. You say that after your prayer every single day. Here's the trick though, every single day. You have to have an action that you commit to every single day. And slowly you begin to build off of that. What you want to make sure is that your salat time, for example, becomes a malaka. You want to be able to go to perform your salat at the right time. But you don't want the prayer itself to be something that you recite like it is robotic. Don't think of malaka in that way. What you want is you want to master the art of prayer. What is prayer? Prayer is the art of communication with Allah. If you're praying the same way at 50 years old as you did at 20 years old, you've wasted 30 years of your life. What have you been doing? You're supposed to be trying to improve that prayer. Why do we pray it 5 times a day? You have to master it. Master your communication with Allah when your heart is present. And the key to mastery, to pushing through that plateau, especially when it comes to spiritual mastery, to revive this fitrah in this month, the key, my brothers and my sisters, is, and this is the golden line, successful people do what they have to do, whether they feel like it or not. Okay? Let me repeat that. Successful people do what they have to do, whether they feel like it or not. So, this applies to all the different fields in your life, and especially applies to your spirituality. It's not about how you feel all the time. I know you want to feel spiritual, but then you have to think to yourself, when I'm praying for that spiritual feeling, am I then praying to have the feeling? Or am I praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because He is my creator and I am His servant, I am His slave? What is it that is my goal? Because Allah can give me the feeling. If He wants to give me the feeling, He'll give me the feeling. It's a great feeling. Inshallah, He always gives it to us. But sometimes it's not there. Does that mean when it's not there that I won't pray with the same energy? Imam Ali alayhi salam tells Malik al-Ashtar in that famous letter, he tells him, Malik, leave your most excellent of times to be between you and Allah. Give Him of your body and your soul. You have to put energy and you have to put effort into your progress, into your movement towards Allah. It takes energy and it takes progress. It's not something that just comes. It's not just a gift. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes, He does send the nur into the heart of whom He wills, but it's the deserving heart, the sound heart, the heart that has worked on itself through self-building over long years. What we want to do, we want to make sure that Ramadan, this very specific time of reviving the fitrah, this condensed course of bringing our fitrah back to life, is a month that we have taken advantage of. We might not get it again. And there is special barakah in this month. Even if you only have a day of it left, make sure to sit down. Just put everything aside. Sit down between you and Allah and ask Him for tawfiq. If you want to ask Him for one hajah, ask Him to allow you to move towards Him, to bring you closer to Him. Because the value of each person is determined, I said by determination, I have said that, but the value of each person in truth is determined in their proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In their proximity to Allah. How close. The value of anything, of any night, of any space is determined in its value according to how close it is to the source of world existence. So any place which takes you away from Allah is further from God, its value is low in existence. Any place which brings you closer to Allah has a higher value, like Najaf, like Mecca. Likewise, times are the same. Ramadan, Laylatul Qadr. People are also the same. People are higher or lower in value based on their proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you want to make sure that you are close to Him. This is the hajah that you want to ask of Him. The aql and the shahwa and the ghadab, these three elements are going to keep fighting inside you. You must make sure, as Ramadan approaches its end, that you are able to put your aql onto the throne of the self. The intellect, the reason has to be on the throne. Ramadan is a time where the fitrah is supposed to be revived because the aql at this time when it's on the throne and shahwa and ghadab, your desire and your anger, are held down through fasting. It's the key to holding down your anger and your desire. Then your intellect is now able to truly direct your heart to God. But if, God forbid, we were not able to do this, and the shahwa and the ghadab, your anger and your desire, which, by the way, inherently are not bad, they are good in a healthy manner, and they are unlimited, right? They don't care how much is in front of them. If you get angry a lot. If you want, if you need, you want and need a lot. Islam, the Sharia and the Aql, they place bars and locks onto them. They let them out when they should be out. But what they want is they want to sit on the throne of the self. And they will try to keep you away from your goal. And that as soon as Ramadan ends, you're able to allow them to roam free. So your anger and desire want to revolt. They want to remove the aql from its rightful place. And they want to sit on the throne. And you know what happens if they take the aql and they put the aql, the intellect, in the dungeon of the self, and they sit on the throne? When your desire sits on the throne of the self and says, "Oh self, go. Do what you will. Enjoy yourself. Go and commit whatever it is that you want to commit. Go and do whatever it is that you want to do." Or anger. Be angry as far as you can, as much as you can. If this is happening, then you've lost. Then your fitrah is going to die. Then there is no more growth, there's no more ascension. You have to make sure that intellect is on the throne. If they are on the throne right now, you have to remove them. You place the intellect back onto the throne. You hold them down through the ahkam and through the aql. Then the heart becomes alive. Then the heart begins to move. Start with something small. So you have to look at your bad habits right now. Especially, the best thing you could have done in Ramadan, according to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told Imam Ali, the best thing that you can do is to stay and keep away from maharimillah, to stay away from those things which are forbidden from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if there are still some of those that are in your life causing blemishes on your heart, you're not going to be able to fly. And they're coming from the anger and the desire. You have to cut off those wings and keep the aql on the seat, on the main throne of the self. To do this, steps. The first step, run away from the place in which you are falling. If there is something that you're doing in a certain place with certain people at a certain time, then do not go back to that place. Do not hang out with those people and be careful around those times. If it means that you're in your room alone, or if it means the opposite of that, that you have to always be with your family, then that's what you do. You have to be careful about the means that are taking you towards this sin. Stay away from that. Secondly, you must never trust the self. You must suspect it. So if you're able to move away from it, alhamdulillah, let's say that Ramadan was great. Okay, we did that. We're over step one. We're able now to move forward. We're starting to fly. Don't think, this is a very important warning. Don't think after Eid, because you ascended, that you can easily go back to that place or go back anywhere and not fall back into that action that you think you have beaten. Suspect the self. Al-nafs ghaddara. They say shaitan shatir. Satan, he is smart. He knows what he's doing. When he is released after Ramadan, he is going to come straight at you. It's okay. Come back. You're good now. Let's go guide these people. Then you go to guide them, you end up falling right back to where you were. So, suspect the self. So you run away from the place, you suspect the self. Thirdly, you must occupy the self. Okay? Like I mentioned, spiritual mastery. Occupying the self is very important. You can't just cut things out and expect that yourself will not fight back. You have to find something else to occupy it, to replace those things. There are many good things that we can do. Of course, aside from ibadah, there are organizations that you can join, charitable organizations that you can join. You can take up the hobby of reading or seeking knowledge. There's a plethora of content that's online right now that we can begin to engage with. Whether it's through your apps or anything else, you find something to occupy yourself with so you do not fall back into that vicious cycle of destroying yourself. So to wrap everything up, we want to attain spiritual mastery. We want to attain a good malakah. We don't want bad malakahs. We want to be masters. We do not want to be dabblers. Successful people do what they have to do, whether they feel like it or not. This is how you're going to revive your fitrah. You're worshipping Allah, not for a feeling. You will ensure that your aql is sitting on the seat, on the right throne of the self, and that the shahwa and ghadab, the desire and the anger, are locked in, and you release them in the right time, because there's a time for both of them, and they are good and they are healthy. We don't want to kill them, but we release them at the right time. Okay? And finally, we have to ensure that we get rid of the bad habits in order to occupy ourselves with good ones by running away from all the different ways in which we can fall back into that sin, by suspecting the self. If after Ramadan we're doing well, not to get arrogant and cocky, that we're not clear yet, we have to stay. If you ask Shaykh Bahjat on his deathbed, did you make it? He wouldn't say yes. If you ask Imam Khomeini on his deathbed, he wouldn't say yes. So you have to be very careful. You have to be vigilant. And thirdly, occupying the self. I, inshallah, will pray for all of you to keep ascending after Ramadan, Please don't forget me from your du'as, and I hope that I can see you all soon, inshallah, with all my love and prayers. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.
So thank you to Sayyid Makke for that wonderful lecture. We appreciate him taking the time to present that lecture for us. We know he's really busy right now. So Jazakallah Sayyid. Now we have a Q&A with Shaykh Mahdi Rastani. Let me just... Shaykh is with us. So Shaykh is just going to start by saying a few words, and then you can submit your questions. So the link for the questions is tinyurl.com/acequestions. You can submit them there, and then I'll relay them to the Shaykh. Shaykh, are you good?
Yes, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum to everybody. I hope everyone is doing well, inshallah. And I'm happy to be with everybody. Inshallah, I know this month of Ramadan went by. Here in Dallas, we were able to have more than a couple of in-person programs. But hopefully soon, inshallah, one day we'll have the opportunity to meet and have the opportunity to interact with the community, inshallah. Q&A, of course, is my favorite time. I prefer Q&A over lectures all the time. So looking forward to the questions, inshallah.
Okay, you ready, Shaykh?
Yes.
Okay, so the first question I guess we can start with is practical tips for maintaining spirituality after the holy month of Ramadan.
All right, great question. So the reality is people look at Ramadan as a marathon because it's 30 days and it takes a long time. So people think that's the marathon, if you can get through Ramadan. And people say, did you have a good Ramadan or a bad Ramadan, or how did it go, from a spiritual perspective? The reality is Ramadan is the beginning point. The marathon is after the month of Ramadan. The marathon is the next 11 months. That's the way to look at it. Really, if you want to implement the spirituality that you built in this month of Ramadan, those 3 steps or 3 tips that our scholars have spoken about, they have written about, they've talked about quite a bit, that's going to be an essential part of everything that you do. The reality is you won't be able to, recite as much Quran, for example, that you were reciting in this month of Ramadan. You may not be fasting throughout the rest of the year, for example. So there are a lot of different elements of Ramadan that are not going to apply in those other months. The elements that do have to apply, if you want to hold on to that spirituality, is going to be, number one, the musharata that you do in the morning. You wake up, your mindset is, I'm not going to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala today. The muraqabah that you do throughout the day, meaning that you are aware of everything that you do, and the muhasabah that you do at the end of the night. These are the 3, so to speak, the very skeleton of building spirituality and building good habits are these 3 that our scholars have spoken about, and Imam Khomeini has touched on in his famous book, Al-Arba'una Hadithan, or what we would refer to as Chihil Hadith, so to speak, right? The 40 Ahadith. So this is the really backbone of building spirituality. As long as you're doing these things after Ramadan, then that's a very good sign. If no, we just go back to just normal things and we forget about doing these things and forget about improving on a daily basis based on these 3 steps, then yeah, unfortunately we will lose that spirituality.
So Shaykh, we have a couple of related questions. I'll give you them both at once and then you can answer. So the first one is kind of similar to the last one. How can I continue to purify my heart after Ramadan? And what are some steps we can take to make sure we don't fall into temptation and control our intentions as well?
Yeah, so like you said, these are related to the previous question. So again, what you would do is you would kind of have like a plan for yourself. And this plan, what it is that first of all, you study yourself, right? I don't know if anyone saw that there was a clip I put out right before Ramadan to answer this question. you study yourself first of all. So what that means is you look at yourself without any sugarcoating or anything like that. You just look at yourself straight, honest with yourself. What are those areas that you need improvement on? And everyone has their own struggle. Everyone has their own issue. For someone, it might be, for example, lowering their gaze. For someone, it might be their dress code. For someone, it might be their salat, their fasting, whatever the case might be. So you study yourself, you identify those areas, and then you come up with a plan in terms of, okay, so this is where I am right now. What am I going to do to help myself reach the second point? And then you use these 3 steps that we mentioned to continue to follow up on that every single day. Okay, this is like a general idea of when we talk about spirituality and making sure that you continue to elevate yourself. And 2 areas that I would say you can always begin with is, number 1, your akhlaq within the household, very, very critical. And number 2, in terms of acts of worship, your salat. Those are the 2 areas that I would highly, highly emphasize on. If I'm struggling, then those are the 2 areas that I need to focus on, because those are 2 the more important things, really. But without consistency, there's no way that someone can grow from a spiritual perspective. This idea, excuse me, that we come on the night of Qadr, and you know, if you have a good night of Qadr, quote unquote, in the sense that you do a bunch of things on the night of Qadr, then all of a sudden you're set for the year. That's not how it works, right? At the end of the day, whether you did all of the a'mal or 2 of them, you still have to come back after Ramadan and you have to try to be consistent with it. And then there's a number of other elements to play a role here as well. Your surroundings, your friends, what type of people they are. Those are all things, you know, there's a number of different factors that will affect how consistent you can be, but that's really what it comes down to.
Okay, so the next question is a bit longer. It's related on one of your lectures, I think. It says, Salam Shaykh, you briefly touched upon a conversation between Imam Sadiq alayhi salam and Abu Shakir in your past lecture. Can you please elaborate with regards to what Imam Sadiq alayhi salam meant when he told Abu Shakir, there's so much movement in this rock? Did he mean this literally, or would you interpret this metaphorically?
Yeah, so great question. The reality is, as a general principle, I think we discussed this in one of the previous tafsir sessions, that whenever we come across a sentence from Quran or Ahlul Bayt, or even in your day-to-day life, you always understand that line literally, unless it's impossible to do so. Then you would say, okay, this is a metaphor, right? And that's your sign. The sign is you can't understand it literally in this manner. So when it comes to these lines of the Ahlul Bayt, we can try to understand them literally as well. We know today, science has told us today that there is movement in atoms. And if there is a stone, then it has, you know, billions or millions or trillions of atoms, however many it has. And so there's movement in it. Could have Imam Sadiq been referring to this movement? Maybe. But as long as we can understand it in a literal way, we would take it in a literal sense. So what we would say is, yes, the Imam is referring to a literal movement that's happening in this stone or in this rock. What movement that is exactly, we don't know. Yes. And Imam Sadiq was just saying that there's so much knowledge out there that I could share with you, O Abu Shakir, but you don't have the capacity to take it. Therefore, I'm not even going to go there. And that's what the Ahlul Bayt used to do quite often. A lot of what they haven't shared is because if they shared anything, people would not understand it. People would call them crazy. People would look at them and say, this guy's out of his mind. So because of that, they wouldn't share a lot of times. So this seems to be another one of those another one of those situations.
So the next question is, often I'm seen as having a rude character when I treat a work relationship as work and avoid personal investigations and chit chat, as I'm often not interested. Am I in the wrong Islamically?
Can you go through that again? It was a bit unclear.
So it says, often I'm seen as having a rude character when I treat work relationships as work relationships and avoid personal investigations and chit chat, as I'm often not interested.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, the reality is that this chit chat that we talk about, from it comes so many different problems. That's why the Quran fundamentally has raised objection when it comes to najwa. Yes, the Quran says that najwa, innama najwa min ash-shaytan. The chit-chatting is from shaytan. And then the Quran moves on and says, listen, some chit-chatting is fine, especially when you're trying to bring two people together. But you see the general demeanor that the Quran has is that, listen, this chit-chat is dangerous. It's scary, right? The reason why the Quran is saying it in that way is because most times what comes out of chit-chat, either it becomes a form of ghaiba, or it becomes a form of tuhmat, ghaibat meaning backbiting, tuhmat meaning accusation, or it just becomes a form of annoying and bothering another person, right? Where you say something about another person and you bother them because of what you have said. So because of all of these different problems that come out of this chit-chatting and this najwa, the Quran has generally taken a bit of a negative approach to this whole concept. So having understood that, yes, the chit-chatting that happens at work, for example, is the same thing. So the only thing I would suggest is, when it comes to people who want you to engage in these types of things, number one, first of all, see if it's necessary. Sometimes investigating a matter is necessary. That's the reality of the matter, right? Sometimes a situation is a situation where things need to be looked into. If the rights of someone is being violated, then someone has to look into it. Now, I don't know if this person asking is in that position or not, so I'm answering it in a broad way, So, but that's the first thing. So sometimes investigating is necessary. But if it's not that, it's about the personal life of this person, has nothing to do with anybody else, This chit-chatting, no, you stay away from it, but you just have to do it in the kindest of ways. I've seen people, when you talk to them, sometimes they even have good intentions. They want to stay away from backbiting or whatnot. And the moment you talk to this person says, don't talk to me, I don't want to backbite. Whereas what I was sharing with them was not even a form of backbiting, right? So you also don't want to fall on that extreme as well. So the way to do it is to just say, I appreciate you sharing this with me. I'm just too busy and I'd rather not talk about these things, please forgive me. And that's it. And you just move on from it. So of course, that's just my wording. You can come up with your own wording for your own situation. Everyone knows their case better, but you just have to walk away from it in the most polite manner as possible without accusing the other side, because you never know. Sometimes what the other person is saying is not tuhmat, it's not backbiting, it's not any of these things, right? So you can walk away with it without giving them the feeling that what they are doing is always wrong, is necessarily wrong. Just do it with politeness. And then if someone doesn't like it, even though you're polite, then they say you're rude, then that probably means they don't know what rude means. Because you've been polite in saying that you didn't want to talk about that issue.
Thank you, Shaykh. So the next question is, what books would you recommend us to read in order to keep our spirituality alive, inshallah? Jazakallah.
Yes, so great question. Number one is Quran. That's the first book we need to read. I will say this, if you do not have for whatever reason, you're not able to sit down, because it is difficult, once we get out of Ramadan, it becomes difficult again. If you don't understand the Arabic directly, or if it's just difficult to sit down and find the time to actually listen to Quran, what I would suggest is just listen to lectures on Quran, right? So and I was just saying this because the question brought this up. There are podcasts out there. I have a podcast myself under Mizan Institute. It's called Tafsir Treasures. It's on all of the podcast platforms. And that's just an example. I'm sure there's many other scholars who have resources of this type. But the point is, just because you can't find the time, it's really not a valid excuse to not infuse yourself with the words of the Quran. So what I would suggest is at least listen to someone explaining the Quran for you, right? All it takes is, instead of listening to, I don't know, some the radio, for example, or the news, or even to like some matam or whatever we listen to, or Sinazani we might listen to in the car. Instead of listening to those things, you just put on this podcast, you learn Quran. If you can't make the time, then at least you have someone to explain the Quran to you, right? That's another way of connecting with the Quran. So that's number one. Number two is, what I would suggest is the books of Shahid Mutahari. They're all on alislam.org. You can find all of them there. So I would highly suggest those as well. to give you a general understanding of the religion of Islam. Our understanding of Islam generally is very superficial. That's just the reality of the matter. And I say that about myself. I've studied, alhamdulillah, but even for myself, when I look at what's out there, my knowledge is superficial as well, right? So we all have to keep learning. So his books are books that have been highly recommended. The translations may not be the 100% best translations all the time, but it's still worth definitely going through his books. Those are two books or two sets of books that I would highly recommend. Nahj al-Balagha is great too, but I will say this: Nahj al-Balagha is difficult to understand. You would need someone to explain it to you. Mizan Institute is actually starting a podcast on Nahj al-Balagha under Shaykh Amin Rastani. But Nahj al-Balagha, the sayings portion of it, I would definitely recommend for whoever can go through those, because they're simple, they're short, you can understand them. But the khutbahs are quite difficult, and I'm afraid someone starts and then they don't feel encouraged enough to continue. That's why I wouldn't necessarily recommend Nahj al-Balagha. Nahj al-Balagha's Arabic is one of the most difficult Arabics you will come across. It's more difficult than the Quran. So yeah, but those are the books that I would definitely recommend. And then anything that has to do with the lives of the Imams, that would definitely be helpful.
Okay, thank you, Shaykh. The next question is, if Imam Ali alayhi salam knew he was going to be killed by Ibn Muljam, why did he go to the mosque?
Yes, good question. This is a question that's been brought up many times before, not just with regards to Imam Ali, but with regards to almost all of the other Imams. And the reality is, different scholars have given different answers to this question. Some have said, yes, the Imam knew that this was going to happen. And yet, because he knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it to happen, he would still go to wherever he had to go. In the case of Imam Ali, he would go to the masjid. In the case of Imam al-Rada, he would drink, for example, the drink that's placed in front of him. So some say they knew, but because this was a will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would do it regardless. And you would say, oh, this is but killing themselves. Killing yourself, this doesn't apply to us. In that scenario and in their context, fundamentally, giving your life knowingly for Allah is not something that's wrong. If you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants that. That's why Ibrahim was willing to to sacrifice his own son, because he knew this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, right? So that's one answer that's given. Some have given other answers that yes, in the last moments before, like for example, something happens, the knowledge is taken away from the Imam. And that in that last moment, he may not remember, for example. That's another response. This may not, apply so much to Ali ibn Abi Talib because he was leaving from the masjid and everything like that. But the first response, I think, is a better response, that yes, they might have known, but because they knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants this, they went ahead with it. The same way Ibrahim, because he knew he was supposed to sacrifice his son, he tried. I mean, it didn't happen, but he tried. So there's no problem in the Prophet or the Imam placing himself in that situation.
So just as a follow-up, so we can assume that same thing for any Imam. Like for example, Imam Hussein alayhi salam definitely knew what he was headed for, right? So was that a situation where he ignored what he knew, or it didn't matter?
No, I mean, when it comes to Imam Hussein, again, scholars have dispute and everything like that. But yeah, the mainstream opinion is that he definitely knew. Yeah, same thing. He might, even if he knew, right? Even if he knew as clear as day, right? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants this from him, he's going to do it. So yeah, it could apply to other situations as well. Imam al-Hussein, like I said, Imam al-Rada alayhi salam, who had foretold of his passing, right? Or of his shahada. So yeah, this is a principle that can apply anywhere.
Okay, it looks like there's a follow-up to that previous question about Imam Sadiq alayhi salam's story. So with that being said, in school we've always been taught that rocks are non-living objects and are static. So where does that put us as a society relative to Abu Shakir in regards to ignorance?
That last portion is a bit unclear. So, but of course we know, like I said, we know today there's movement in atoms, right? And, rocks and stones have atoms, obviously. So there's definitely movement inside of them, right? And then if you want to add quantum physics to that adds another layer of movement to everything. That adds a layer of movement to you and I as well. So it's not, if the question was, does it contradict science? No, it doesn't really contradict science.
Okay, the next question is, I think it's about your lecture on Shafa'ah. It's, you mentioned that anyone who perceives what they believe to be the whole truth will be able to benefit from Shafa'ah. What about those who have beliefs that are against Islam, but they believe them to be the absolute truth? How does Shafa'ah apply to those people? Because you could argue that they genuinely believed that they were doing the right thing.
Yeah, so for them, the discussion might be a little different in terms of shafa'ah. Will the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cover a person who was acting upon the truths that were presented to them? Absolutely. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is two things. He is Adil and He is Rahman and Rahim. So to say that He is not going to be, number one, just, and number two, kind and compassionate towards a person who did not know the truth out of no fault of his own would definitely be contradictory to the fundamental principles of our religion. So we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be compassionate towards this person. The only thing is, shafa'ah is a specific type of mercy. Now, does this specific type of mercy apply to someone who does not fall within the ummah of the Prophet? That doesn't seem to be the case. But the point is, that doesn't mean that this person is going to be deprived of the mercy of God, right? This person can still, be blessed with the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe not just specifically with this concept of shafa'ah, right? So hopefully that answers the question. Because when you go to hadith, that hadith kind of give you a sense of the Prophet is doing shafa'ah for his ummah. Multiple times it says ummati, ummati, right? And even some have narrated that on that day he actually says that, ummati, ummati, meaning that he's worried about his ummah. So that seems to be, what the case is, but like in the form of shafa'ah. But does that mean that others are deprived of God's mercy in general? No, that's something that does not mesh with what we understand from Islam. So they'll still benefit from general mercy of Allah, maybe not particularly in the form of shafa'ah. I only say maybe not because when you go to hadith, it doesn't say they're deprived. It just says that the shafa'ah is going to be there for the ummah, right? So the hadith doesn't tell us, explicitly if it applies to others as well or not.
Thanks, Shaykh. So there's a question here. You mentioned that some people are repelled by Imam Ali. What is the point of this? Why would God not create Imam Ali to attract everyone?
The reason why they're repelled is because they're repelled by good things and good attributes and good characteristics, right? Sometimes people can be repelled by you or from you because of the good attributes and characteristics that you have, right? People may not like it because their essence and their nature is already polluted. When they come across you, for example, or Ali ibn Abi Talib, who's already purified and has all of the perfections, they might feel like this is something that they don't want to be around, right? So that's the reason why they're repelled. It's the whole point of the story was not that Ali ibn Abi Talib has characteristics that repels others. The point was that people are such that they are repelled by the good characteristics of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So in other words, as we would say today, it says more about them and their negative attributes than it says about Ali ibn Abi Talib. It's the problem is from them, right? The same way, for example, if a criminal were to see a judge, he's not going to like the judge, right? It's not like he's going to be best buddies with a judge because he knows that this judge, he's just and he's going to do things right. He doesn't like him. So he's repelled by him, but not because there's a problem in the judge.
Okay. So the next question, you had mentioned in your lecture the blaming of God when something happens in your life and the saying, if God loved me, why would he put me through this? How can someone dealing with depression strengthen their faith in God instead of blaming him for what he has willed? What are some ways to deal with depression in Islam?
Good question. The reality is, from an Islamic perspective, depression or any mental health issues, though they are affected by the strength of the faith of a human being, they're affected by these things, but the faith of a human being is not the fundamental cause of these issues. Meaning that if faith is there, therefore this person will never get depressed. No, that's not the case. So to answer your question, and I say this because we have this misunderstanding within our cultures and our societies that if you have strong faith, you'll never get depressed. No, if anyone's been through depression before, you know exactly what I mean. That it's almost not even in your hands many times, at least initially when it starts out. It's not even really in your hands. So this is wrong to assume that, you know, if your faith is strong, you'll never deal with these mental health issues. No, that's a fundamental misunderstanding in Islam. It's more of a cultural thing. In Islam, yes, your faith can affect your mental health, meaning that it can potentially play a role in helping you on your path. So to answer the second part of the question, what are some ways to combat it? Number one, first important distinction that we have to create is this depression at a clinical level? Can it be diagnosed or not? If it can be diagnosed, the number one person you go to is a professional. There's no scholar or alim or I don't know, person of faith who can help you with a situation where you are clinically diagnosed or can be clinically diagnosed with depression, right? So that's the place where professionals play a role. The same way if Mortaza's, you know, hand broke right now, God forbid, I can't help him with it, right? He has to go to the doctor, God forbid. So same thing, right? It's just like that. So that's number one. But having said that, the depression, in a sense, if what we mean by depression is just generally feeling down. Maybe I see something happens in my life and I feel down about it. Maybe generally speaking, I have some insecurities. All of this, the only remedy to it is to strengthen your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to speak to him more often, to pray more often. When I say praying more often, I don't mean like putting extra pressure on yourself. That's not what I'm referring to. I mean trying to connect with him. And then at the same time, reminding yourself and understanding that he's there with you and he understands these struggles and concerns that you are going through. These are the main ways. Now, there are other things, you know, journaling is another way to deal with these issues. Having positive people around you makes a huge difference in life. And again, I'm not speaking in terms of depression when it's diagnosed, like in a clinical setting. No, just mean like in terms of feeling down. It makes a huge difference what type of individuals you have around you. So these are some of the different ways. Islam gives us a general approach in this regard. Islam is not here to give us very detailed, if you feel depressed, do this, right? Islam is here to elevate our faith. And through that, these feelings of feeling down, sad, guilty sometimes, having anxiety, the stronger the faith becomes, these things slowly move away from the human being. Yes, I've mentioned this twice up until now. I will reiterate it again so that there are no misunderstandings, that if the depression that we're talking about is not just feeling down sometimes or, you know, something like that, it's in the clinical sense of the word. It is a very serious thing. You have to refer to a professional. I would go as far as saying it's wajib to refer to a professional, right? Because if you don't treat it, it might get worse and worse and worse and affect your life, God forbid, in a multitude of different ways. So if it's that serious, it has to be done through a professional.
Thank you, Shaykh. I know that's a complex question to answer in a short time, but thank you. So a reminder that questions are submitted at tinyurl.com/acequestions. That's the only place we'll be taking them. It's submitted anonymously. We already have a lot, so that's the only place where we're sorting through them. So if you have a question, make sure to send them there, not through social media or YouTube. So the next question, Shaykh, is what are some tips to develop discipline?
What are some tips to develop discipline? That's a tough one, you know, because when it comes to this issue, you know, you know the Nike slogan. Of course, the Nike slogan is a little tainted for us at this point with the whole China situation and all of that. But I just mean to refer to it in the sense of, the slogan says, just do it, the reality is we just have to, get our, muster up our courage and start to be more consistent, right? That's the way to build the discipline. These 3 steps that I mentioned, is the very backbone. I mean, you're not going to come across anyone who's more into and more well-versed in building spirituality in the human being than the likes of Imam al-Khomeini and Allama Tabatabai. And both of them on separate occasions point to these 3 points that I made at the beginning of the talk in one of the questions. That number one, every single day he wakes up, this idea of obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is at the forefront of his mind. He watches himself throughout the day, that is muraqabah. And at the end of the day, he sits back and he does some calculating to see how the day went. Now, again, another element that I think is very, very important is, yes, your surroundings are very important. What type of people you spend time with and what type of values they have, that is extremely important. Sometimes you spend time with a person who, just by being with this person, you feel more spiritually uplifted. And sometimes you spend time with another person for hours, and after it's done, you're just like, I mean, you feel, as if you just wasted 3 hours, and you just feel, sometimes you even feel down because this person might even be a negative person, for example. So the type of people you spend time with is very important. You should be paying attention to who your friends are when you sit with them. Do you walk away with a sense of, I want to be a better person? Or do you just walk away with having talked about a bunch of random things and just life goes on? But outside of that, I mean, it just boils down to that. Allama Tabatabai received this letter from this young man. And he said, I've asked the scholars this question and none of them gave me a proper response. But, I'm hoping you can give me a proper response because you're different from all of them. I'm dealing with this issue. I'm going through these sins. I don't know what to do. And Allama Tabatabai pointed to these 3 points. He said, listen, do these 3 things, be consistent with them. And he said, initially it's going to be very difficult, but soon with the help of Allah, you'll be able to set some of them aside, some of these sins aside. So that's fundamentally, there are smaller points here or there that can help, but this is the backbone of it, really.
Thanks, Shaykh. Just a note, if you want your questions answered, submit them now. Don't wait, because we're not going to take too much longer of the Shaykh's time. I know for our usual Wake-a-Thons we go until Fajr, but obviously we won't be doing that for this. This is just like a mini version because of the circumstances. So inshallah, next year we can have our normal Wake-a-Thon again. But yeah, just make sure to submit your question now, because once we end, I don't want you to submit your question and then you don't get an answer. And then the ones that are submitted, we'll answer as many as we can within the next few minutes. So, Shaykh, the next question is, how can I develop myself to speak in the best of manners as the Quran tells us to? What does this mean? And then they also said, where do I learn to speak and converse in the etiquette of the Ahlul Bayt? So I don't know if they're asking for a source or...
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of a source, to be honest, but I will share some of the points that come to my mind in this regard. Funny enough, last Ramadan, the 3 nights of Qadr, we talked about the lectures that I delivered at our own center here in Dallas was called Etiquette of Speech, and it was 3 nights on the etiquette of how you're supposed to speak. The reality is this area of speech is a huge problem in our communities and in our interactions, because speaking is the way we interact with one another. And one of the reasons why sometimes our youth, sometimes even elders, are repelled by being a part of a center or an Islamic center or, a Husseiniya or whatever, you want to call it, a religious establishment, is because of the way that we speak to one another, right? So here's some of the points that just come to my mind. Sometimes there are individuals who, they just start talking and then they never end. That's kind of my pet peeve. They'll just go up, as we normally say, they go up on the minbar. I won't say it about scholars, but you know what I mean, like normal people, yeah? They just keep going on, and I'm just like, okay, like, can we get to the real issue here? That's one issue you have. But beyond that, one of the biggest issues that I found in speaking is you just have to be able to control your akhlaq and always keep a friendly tone. You'll be surprised what a friendly tone can do in terms of your personal life and even in terms of your professional life. How much more successful you can be when you can control your akhlaq and keep a control of your frustration, so that when you speak to people, you speak to them with the good akhlaq. Sometimes someone might say something, you might want to just lose it in that moment, right? the more you learn to control yourself in those moments, the better it's going to be. So another area that I find people always forget about is being empathetic towards the person who is speaking. So I'll give you an example. Of course, that lecture, I believe it should be somewhere up on YouTube. I don't know. But in those lectures, I gave this example. If someone came to you and started to speak about a big achievement that they had, or someone spoke to you about a difficulty that they're going through, a lot of times people will take the discussion and make it about themselves real quick. So if you tell them about a difficulty you're going through, before you know it, they'll be telling you about their difficulty and how much bigger their difficulty is. And now you don't even feel like talking anymore. There's no empathy in the conversation, yes? Or sometimes when you come to someone with an achievement and this person just takes a discussion and turns it into a discussion about their own achievements, and their achievements, they outshine yours, then you're like, you didn't even get anything out of this conversation. So these are some of those elements that is important in our conversation with one another. And I can't emphasize this enough. Speaking properly in a good way with one another, it goes such a far and such a long way. So I wish I had the link for those talks. I would just give it to Mortaza or something, and then if anyone wanted to refer to those. But these are just some of the points that come to my mind from that discussion that we were having. And then last point I'll make is joking. Joking it can be a very dangerous thing. So you have to be very, very careful about the jokes that you make. Yes, every now and then you might say something, it slips your tongue, so to speak, and you just apologize afterwards. But generally speaking, we joke with one another a bit too much in too much of a direct way in our communities usually. And then we give people nicknames sometimes. These are all part of the afat and the plagues, so to speak, of speech.
Thanks, Shaykh. So we have a couple of fiqhi questions, so I'm going to ask them together. So the first one is, why is there a difference between breaking fast? Why is there a difference breaking fast between Shia and Sunni? And then the other one is, Salam Shaykh, when one becomes najis when they go to the loo/toilet, do they have to clean, for example, the toilet or shower after themselves?
Good question. So I'll start with the first one. The difference between Shia and Sunni on this issue has to do with when the time of Maghrib is. Many scholars within the Shia school of thought have this particular opinion that the redness of the sky has to disappear, and therefore it's 15-20 minutes usually after sunset. There are scholars within Islam who do not believe such a thing. Even the ruling of Ayatollah Sistani, it's kind of close to that actually. But in reality, for him, Maghrib is further away. So I don't want to create any confusion there. His ruling is that Maghrib is not sunset. But if you actually take a look at his ruling in Minhaj al-Salihin, you'll find some details there that might even be closer to the other side. But anyways, and then we have scholars who don't have that opinion actually. Ayatollah Bahjat was a very famous scholar who has passed away, of course, and who used to believe that sunset is Maghrib time. But that's fundamentally where it comes from. And the difference of that comes from hadith, right? Where, by the way, is the difference of a lot of the different fiqh issues that are different between the two schools of thought. And so I've seen a lot of people, they get stuck on, why does this person pray like this and I pray like that, and all these different issues. A lot of these issues go back to the fundamental idea that they have one body of hadith. We have a different body of hadith. Okay, so when you have two different people, you're asking the same question, you get two different responses, right? So that's where a lot of these differences lie. And I've seen a lot of people who focus on these differences instead of focusing on the more fundamental issues. The more fundamental issue, with our respect to all schools of thought within Islam, is who can speak on behalf of the Prophet, right? Can the Sahaba of the Prophet generally just speak on his behalf? Or does it have to be someone who's appointed? That's what all of this fundamentally comes down to. The rest of these debates, not debates, or differences of opinion between the schools of thought, it comes from this issue. Because you're asking Ali ibn Abi Talib and his family, this person might be asking another one of the Sahaba of the Prophet, of, I don't know, Abdullah bin Mas'ud, and I don't know, a number of other Sahaba that they have, right? So that's where a lot of that difference comes from. Relating to the second question, I'm not sure exactly what they mean, but I will say this, that when someone is doing tathir, in the bathroom, the things that were directly in touch with the area that was najis, when you make that area tahir, those things that were directly in touch with it also become tahir as well, right? Otherwise, if you think about it, technically nothing would ever become najis. Nothing would ever become tahir, rather, right? So that's an important point to remember. But the question they're asking is like the shower and the bathroom. If you know other people are using it, then yeah, I mean, you should definitely try to make it tahir as well.
Just to follow up on that, Shaykh, what would you suggest for people who are like really, I guess, paranoid about this stuff, like when it comes to najasat and stuff? Like, what would you suggest?
What I would suggest is getting in touch with an alim and discussing the rulings with them, because most people who go through these issues, they are not aware of the rulings, right? If they become aware of the rulings, then life becomes quite a bit easier. So that's what I would suggest. If you don't know the rulings and you're guessing, then you'll take everything and you'll wash it 5 times. The reality is, if you learn the rulings, a lot of this will become a lot easier. So that will definitely help. And then meanwhile, if you keep having doubts about things, you just have to disregard them, because this issue of waswas is very, very serious. It is very serious. I mean, I've seen lives fall apart because of this issue. So wherever you are right now, especially if it's in the early stages, start disregarding those doubts, number one. And number two, you can reach out to someone who can help you with that.
Thank you, Shaykh. So the next question is, we often speak about Lady Zainab when it comes to the musibats. How come we rarely hear of Lady Kulthum, who was also there for all of them? And then their second question is, same question for the other daughters of our Holy Prophet. And then they said, we often accuse other schools of not paying enough attention to the Ahlul Bayt, but don't we leave out some of them as well?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, when it comes to masa'ib, the reality is we just have to go based off narrations. Whatever narrations come to us, So sometimes a narration is from Kulthum, sometimes a narration is from Zainab. To be honest, when I was doing masa'ib of Ali ibn Abi Talib these past 5 nights, both for you guys and even in our own place, the narrations, a lot of them that we were sharing actually were from Kulthum. They were not from Zainab salamullahi alayha. Yes, when it comes to Karbala, it seems to be a little bit from the other way around. The reality is that it's just narrations. Maybe Lady Zainab was more in a position of leading, right? And she was more in a position where she was seen more, in the sense that her role was acknowledged more, and therefore historically we have more data and info about it. Otherwise, I don't think there's any other reason other than that. And it's important to stick to the narrations. Yes, a lot of times you can do what we call zaban hal. You can say, yes, Kulthum was thinking something like this. I don't know if anyone picked up it, but in some of the masa'ib, I was saying, maybe it was like this, right? That's a very important distinction, because our masa'ib has to be a masa'ib that is coming from the narrations. Far too often. I mean, I cannot tell you how much. This would be a whole other session, but I cannot tell you enough how much people at times, hear masa'ib or recite masa'ib, who may not even be scholars at times. And the masa'ib is just from, like different places, and, anything that'll make people cry. And listen, we can't do that. We can't do that to the heritage of the Ahlul Bayt. So to answer the question of this brother or sister, whoever asked this question, we're just going based off of narrations, right? If there's more narrations about like Zainab salamullahi alayha, then most of the masa'ib will be about her. Of course, you always mention all of the children of the Ahlul Bayt. In terms of leaving them out, if they're referring to this idea of the masa'ib, I don't think that's a form of leaving them out, really, right? That's just, like I said, the masa'ib has to be referenced. It has to be coming from some source, at least. Some relatively reliable source, I would say. At least not some random book, right? Or the imagination of someone who thought that on the night of this happened, for example, because it would make the story even more dramatic, right? And there's too much of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, so there was a second part to that. It was about the other daughters of the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. The reality is that some of the relatives of the Prophet in history, we have more info about them. Some, historical figures, we have less info about them. The wives of the Prophet is the same thing, right? If you look, for example, right now, amongst the wives of the Prophet, the Aisha, she has thousands of ahadith are narrated by her. She played a big social role, and of course, we raise objection and we have issues with how Islamic history initially played out, and we have our own take on it. But the point I'm trying to make is in terms of playing a social role and being present within society, some wives are more like that. There's more narrations mentioned of them and whatnot. Some wives are less like that. Khadija salamullahi alayha, she left this world before many of the other wives of the Prophet. And therefore, when you speak about Khadija salamullahi alayha, in terms of narrations from her, we have some data, but it's less compared to other figures at that time. Lady Fatima is another example. I would say there's less about her as well, right? Even though she is such a valuable individual. So it really goes based on that. It's not a matter of leaving out somebody. It's based on what history has to tell us about these individuals. There are great individuals in history that we don't know anything about just because we don't have any historical data on it, right? That's the reality of the matter.
Just a couple follow-ups on your answers. The
Mhm.
first one is, did the Prophet have like other daughters who were like adults? And the second one is, so the reason, like for example, we don't commemorate the wiladat or wafat of Lady Kulthum, is that because just we don't know them, or like that? I guess it's not just musibat, right? It's also things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that when we commemorate somebody, we're commemorating based on their spiritual level slash value, whatever the case may be, right? So the likes of Khadija, the likes of Fatima, their value and their status is much greater than others. Not to put down others. Amongst others, you had Salama. Salama was the one who wanted to come under the cloak of the Prophet, right? And the Prophet said, "Innaki ala khair," and even Ahlul Sunnah have narrated this. That yes, you're on a good path. You're a very good person, but you just can't come under this cloak. So again, when we commemorate certain individuals' dates, it's because this person has a distinctive role or character. Otherwise, if we wanted to just commemorate every the birthday or the wafat or shahadat of every valuable person, we would have to commemorate the whole year in reality, right? So that's that. Did the Prophet have other daughters? It seems as though he did, right? There was Ruqayya, there was Kulthum as well. Yes, there were other daughters of the Prophet. Why does Fatima salamullahi alayha stand out for us? Of course, she stands out because of her status.
Okay, thank you, Shaykh. We'll move on from that question. So the next question is, can those who have passed away communicate with us through our dreams, for example, family members?
Yes, fundamentally, dreams is a very intriguing topic. Yes, the answer is at times that is possible, but it's a very important but here, and that is this: um, to be able to know that is a very difficult thing, and it's something that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has not given us the knowledge of. So at times we might be in a position where we have a dream, we don't know exactly what it means. The reality is a dream goes through different filters, right? And these filters change the reality that the soul saw, our soul had witnessed in the other world, and it presents itself in different ways. So how do you know what is being said, right? So what I will say is fundamentally when it comes to dreams, some dreams do have value to them. Some dreams don't have any value at all. Some dreams you just had a lot of food the night before I go to sleep. I have a terrible dream for whatever the case might be. But no, sometimes dreams do have value as well. The problem is, like, first of all, telling if it's valuable dream or not. Number two, then telling what the dream is trying to say. It's not the easiest thing. If you know someone, I don't know any ta'bir khab, so if I did, I'd probably be very wealthy at this point, because I would just sit and do interpretation of dreams instead of preparing lectures. But if you know someone who can do it for you, or someone who knows that you feel confident in, You can ask them. If you don't feel confident in the person, it's better not to tell them. Yes, hadith tells us that when you have dreams, it's better not to share it with random people, because apparently the way they do interpretation of it can potentially have an effect of how it actually plays out in your life. So they say, for example, when it comes to a person who is hasud, to not share your dreams with that person. Of course, it doesn't mean if you've done this before, it's like the end of the world or anything like that. It's nothing to worry about, just general recommendations. So to answer the question, is it possible? Yes, it's possible. But is it something you should be worried about or concerned about? Let's say you can't find someone to interpret this dream. Does it mean that now, for example, this loved one of yours is stuck somewhere and they need your help? No, if you're worried about any of that, whether for yourself or for your loved one, you can give some sadaqah on your behalf, on their behalf, and whatever it is, inshallah, the problem will be taken care of. Dreams is a long discussion. Inshallah, some other time we can do a separate lecture on it.
Thank you, Shaykh. So we're just going to take a couple more questions and then we're going to head to our Kahoot game. So the next question is, what's the importance of communication, listening, and being emphatic in a relationship with your loved ones? What can I do when my partner doesn't really listen to me or acknowledge my feelings?
All right. So what's the importance of this? It's the most important thing ever. I mean, in a relationship, if you don't show empathy, if you don't try to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, this relationship is going to be very bumpy. If it lasts, really. Sometimes it won't even last, God forbid. So the reality is this is very, very important. And for those who are not married yet, please allow me to, as a younger or older brother, I don't know whichever age that you might be, please allow me to say, start working on this today. Like, start working on it from right now. A lot of people, they start preparing for their marriages. Oh, I'm gonna buy this ring, or I'm gonna have this type of a setting for the wedding. No one sits there and says, I'm gonna have this type of akhlaq. When things get difficult, I'm gonna start working on myself from right now, so that later on I don't lose my temper, I don't lose my cool. So jokingly, I used to say, some of us, we don't work on our akhlaq, and then every couple of minutes, something happens in the house, we turn into Incredible Hulk all of a sudden, and we just lose it. You don't want to be like that. You want to start working on these things from right now, right? So it's very, very critical. What I would say in those situations where the other side does not understand this is, listen, you just have to be, and if anyone, if they're married brothers and sisters watching this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's just a matter of being patient and explaining it over and over again. The idea that I explained this once and he didn't get it or she didn't get it, that's not how marriage works. Okay, marriage is, you have to have this back and forth in the sense that you go back to the same issue, you speak to this person of the same issue, with keeping your cool, keeping your calm. Just imagine, like, how many times did your mother or father have to tell you something until you actually implemented it, right? When we were growing up, it was like 10, 15 times they had to tell us. The reality is, in a marriage, that's kind of what it's like, It shouldn't be. Ideally, it shouldn't be that way, right? But many times with issues that have been lingering for a long time, that's how it is. So if he doesn't understand or she doesn't understand, you have to sit down with this person and say, listen, when I come to you and I am speaking to you of a difficulty that I'm going through, this is how I want you to react. I want you to say this, for example. Sometimes you go to someone, you just want them to say this one sentence, which is wonderful, no problem, yeah? But you have to communicate that to them. And it may take many more times than just one time, right? So this is time you have to invest in this relationship and continue to communicate about communicating. Okay, so that's the answer to the question. You have to communicate about communicating. You come to this wife or husband and you say, listen, when this happens, or that time when I shared this with you, you said this. I know you're trying to help, but this is what I wanted to hear, for example, right? So it just takes communication, more communication to get the communication right.
So we'll just take 2 more questions, Shaykh, and hopefully we'll get through them somewhat quickly. I don't think they're too complicated. The first one might be a little complicated. So it's saying, in the time of Imam Ali, alayhi salam, we don't see him ever discussing or negotiating with Muawiyah. What happened that so soon after his death, Imam Hassan made a treaty, and why did he not continue the fight?
That's a good question. There were certain developments that took place between the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib and the time of Imam al-Hasan, right? So when you read the story of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, interestingly enough, what you find is Imam Ali had 3 battles. In all of these 3 battles, right, only one of them had to do with Muawiyah, really. But regardless, he was trying to go and take care of Muawiyah. Like from the beginning till the end, the problem was Muawiyah. So on his way to the Battle of Jamal, he was actually heading out towards Syria to deal with Muawiyah, and then he was dragged to another corner. When he went to Siffin, obviously he went up straight against Muawiyah. And then when things did not end the way he wanted things to end, Abu Musa was on one side and Amr ibn As was on the other side, and this whole idea of Hakamiyya came up, and it just turned into a circus and everyone left. Everything went back to normal. Then the 3rd time, he was actually preparing again to go back to Siffin, right? And then Nahrawan happened. So there's a couple of developments that happened here. Number one is that the reality is that thousands died in these events. Thousands died in these battles. The Battle of Siffin, it took, on the side of Ali ibn Abi Talib, they've said 25,000 casualties. On the other side, much, much more than that, 50,000, even more has been mentioned in history. Battle of Jamal, there were casualties as well. Nahrawan, the casualties were a little less, but when you put all of this together, this is no longer that ummah that was ready to answer to the call of Ali ibn Abi Talib. This was a group of people who were already tired. And they were tired even before Ali left this world. Because before Ali went to Nahrawan, his final battle, he was preparing to go to Siffin, and no one would join him, right? And this is where a lot of those khutbahs of Nahj al-Balagha are mentioned about the people of Kufa, that, oh, people of Kufa, I call you, but you won't come. Ya ashbah al-rijal wala rijal. Oh, you who look like men, but you're not men. Because at this point, from their perspective, they had become tired, right? And they couldn't bear the idea of going back to the battlefield again and again. Siffin was not one day. Siffin took at least 3 months. Some have said even more than that, right? So it was a very difficult and troublesome time. By the time it came to Imam al-Hasan, these people were tired and they were not even ready to fight anymore. And Imam al-Hasan knew that things were not going to end well. So the only option that he had was to do something like Imam al-Hussein was going to do, except people would not understand what was happening because Muawiyah was so good at deceiving people. Therefore, he did not do so. And Imam al-Hussein also did not do so. Imam al-Hussein also, we speak about Imam al-Hasan doing the whatever talks that he had with Muawiyah. In reality, Imam al-Hussein also did not do so anything until Yazid came into power. 10 years or so, roughly, he did not engage in battle with Muawiyah. When Yazid came into the picture, then that's when things changed. So I hopefully that answers the question. A lot of it had to do with the circumstances of the Muslim Ummah at that time.
Thank you, Shaykh. So the last question is basically one we have for so like it's one of the reasons we do the Wake-a-Thon is because it's recommended to spend these nights awake. So just like what are a few of the best amal you would recommend just on like a normal Ramadan night, not necessarily Laylatul Qadr, or just like a list of amal or recommendations and tips?
Yes. So first, most important amal I can do. Number 1, tawbah. Number 1, repent. Number 1, look back at what I've done, realize what wrong things I've done, and repent. I'm going to continue from this one because I'm assuming this one we've already done. But there are those who go through these nights, they just do a bunch of good deeds, and their plan is, I'm just going to go back to doing the same thing. Many of us have this habit that we set aside haram things in Ramadan, but then after Ramadan, it's just the same thing. I don't know if you've heard this. Like people say, oh, Shaykh, music, I don't listen to music in Ramadan. Alhamdulillah, wonderful. That's wonderful. But after Ramadan, some music is haram after Ramadan as well, right? So we have to pay attention to that. So deciding to stay away from sin is the biggest thing you can do in this month of Ramadan. That's number 1. Number 2, of course, Salatul Layl, the nafila, namaz al-shab, as we say, so to speak. That is definitely highly, highly recommended. Number 3, thought and contemplation. sitting and thinking about where you're headed, where your life is headed. This doesn't even have to be at a particular time. It can just be when you're driving home, maybe when you're eating something late at night, maybe while you're snacking. Thought and contemplation can come at any point. But just sitting down and reflecting on the idea that, this life of mine, I don't know when it's going to be taken away from me. I don't know when I'm going to have an opportunity like this again. If Shaitan comes to me and tells me to do this or that, he tells me I'm going to live for 100 years, but I don't think I'm going to live for 100 years. I don't know that. I might these moments of reflection are very, very critical. And the nights of Qadr, these are general, but at any time they're important. Even on the nights of Qadr, if you remember, we just mentioned this in the importance of knowledge lecture, that these are nights that these are recommended on. Gaining knowledge is another one of them. Acquiring knowledge, whether that is reading whatever you can read from Ahlul Bayt or whatever the case may be. Recitation of Quran, highly recommended, but with the meaning though. With the meaning. I can't emphasize that enough. Sometimes one verse you read changes the way you look at the world. Okay, so you want to read Quran with the meaning, and if you can't, then just subscribe to some podcast that can explain the Quran to you so that you don't have to sit down and read it on your own. But yeah, these are some of the amal that come to my mind.
Thank you, Shaykh. Let me just make sure.
I will say this while we're on this point before we move on. Just speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is another wonderful one. And then from the du'as, I will mention this as well, that whatever you connect with more, right? Just do that du'a. For example, Munajat of Imam Ali is one that I personally like, right? Because it's simple. I understand it very easily. I love how he draws contrast between Mawlaya ya Mawlaya anta al-qawi wa ana al-da'if wa hal yarhamu al-da'ifa illa al-qawi. He draws contrast between who you are and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So any of these du'as that you like, even if you can't do the whole thing, even a portion of it, there's no problem in that. You're connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is wonderful as well. So I just wanted to add that.
Yes, thank you, Shaykh. We do actually have the munajat at the end of our program tonight. So I just want to thank Shaykh Rastani, not just for tonight, but for giving us his time throughout this holy month. I know it's a very busy time for you, and we really benefited from your lectures and your tafsir classes. So I just want to thank you and really wish you all the best, and Jazakallah, Shaykh.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the community for giving us this opportunity, and hopefully we can see one another in person when all of this has settled down, inshallah.
Thank you, Shaykh. We will be playing Kahoot now. Shaykh, you can play, but you probably have an unfair advantage. So
no, I'll drop off, inshallah.
The questions are related both to Shaykh's lectures and general trivia questions. So you see the link there for registering for the game if you want to be eligible for a prize. And we also have the Kahoot game should be ready. So you're going to need to go to another browser on whatever device you're on, or use a separate device to open the Kahoot game. So go to kahoot.it and then enter the code that will be coming up on your screen shortly. So you have to go to kahoot.it, and then where it asks for the game pin, enter that pin. We do have prizes for the top 3 scores, so all the best of luck. Once again, the questions are both related to the Shaykh's Ramadan lectures and just general trivia. So kahoot.it. So the registrations have been coming in, that's good. Once everyone joins the actual game, then we'll get started. A reminder that sometimes Kahoot will kick you out based on your Wi-Fi. You can join back in at any time, but it'll restart your score from that point. So there's nothing we can do about that. We'll let you know about that ahead of time. I wanted to remind you also about 2 things. The Ace Ramadan food drive you can still take part in, and the ACIC fundraiser for the needy in Afghanistan. You can still take part in that as well. For information on both of those, please go to tinyurl.com/Ace Ramadan 2021. So we're just going to give it a few minutes here for everyone to join. So you'll see on your screen now the fundraiser during these difficult times. There's a lot of people struggling in Afghanistan. So we're just essentially crowdfunding to send it back home to those who need it. So Jazakallah in advance. I'll just repeat one more time. So to take part in the game, you have to open a separate browser, or on another device you have to open a browser. Go to kahoot.it, as it says at the top there. Enter this game pin, and then you'll be ready to play. Just sit tight until we get everyone on. And if you still need to register to be eligible for a prize, you can go to tinyurl.com/ace game, and that's if you want to be eligible for a prize. Everyone is welcome to play. We do have prizes for the top 3. Yeah, I have received a message. The Kahoot is fine, so if you're having trouble joining, it's probably your Wi-Fi. Try using your data, or switch between the two, whichever you're using. But yeah, it's fine on our end. Like I said, it might kick you out, but you can join back in at any time. So I'll give it another 30 seconds. If anyone is watching this and they're not on yet, that's the countdown there. So 30 seconds. And then after this, we do have a recitation of the Munajat of Imam Ali that the Shaykh just mentioned, recited by Bilal Hashimi, and then we'll end our program after that. So I'll just take you through some rules of Kahoot. You'll see a question on the screen, and then on your phone or device, you'll see the answers, like the colors of the answers. So make sure you select the color that corresponds to the answer you want to pick. Speed is very important, so even if everyone gets it right, someone will get more points for answering it faster. So speed and accuracy are both important when it comes to Kahoot. So we'll start. Just once again, if you do have issues with connectivity, there's nothing really we can do about that, so feel free to hop back on whenever you can. So here we go. Good luck to everyone. What is the holiest month of the year? So starting you guys off with the easy one. Also remember that because we're on YouTube, there's a slight delay, so the sooner you answer, the better, to avoid any issues with the delay. Basically, it's always better to answer sooner. So that's good. Most people got that right. And we have an early leaderboard. What shape is a stop sign generally? Square, a hexagon, octagon, triangle. And don't pay attention to where my mouse is. It's just random. Don't let that lead you astray. Yes. Octagon, most people got that correct, and Sakina M has settled in first. Let's see if she stays there. What does the hadith innamal a'malu binniyat mean when in relation to a person's intention? So the religious questions are based on the Shaykh's lecture, so you have to answer based on the lecture, the most correct one based on his lectures. Whether there's other interpretations or not, that's really not part of the game. That's correct. Your intention determines if an act is accepted. You still do the act, but the intention is important. And we have a new leader. What major event in a person's existence challenges the acceptance of Shafa'ah? Judgment Day, Eid al-Fitr, Ashura, Laylatul Qadr. So there's going to be a big advantage for those who remember the Shaykh's lectures. So Judgment Day, that's correct. And we have a new set of leaders. What is a condition that would prevent you from receiving Shafa'ah? If you commit many sins, if you do not ask for mercy while still alive, if you have ever mocked Shafa'ah, if you disrespect your parents. Correct. So the Shaykh did say in the lecture, you have to be ask for the mercy while you're alive. So Naveed is our new leader. What act is especially recommended during the nights of Qadr, according to the Shaykh's lecture? Recitation of Dua Kumail, recitation of Surah Al-Baqarah, Salat of Jafar al-Tayyar, Tahsil al-Ilm, acquiring/gaining knowledge. But you please answer as soon as you see the answer that you're looking for. Don't wait for me to read them out because you're going to fall behind. That's correct. Tahsil al-Ilm. Naveed staying on top, but we have a new person in second position. Lots of movement so far. Which Imam said knowledge is that which protects you, whereas wealth you have to protect it? Imam Hassan alayhi salam, Imam Ali alayhi salam, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, Imam Riza alayhi salam. That's a hadith by Imam Ali alayhi salam. Good job. Most people got that right. And Naveed still on top. Which surah talks about how the people of his time should address the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam respectfully? Surah Al-Hujurat, Surah Al-Qadr, Surah Muhammad, Surah Teen. Also, once again, this is from one of the Shaykh's lectures. It has to be the surah that he mentioned. Surah Al-Hujurat is correct. And we have a new podium completely. Lots of movement today. So this one is double points. Immediately after following the Battle of Badr, on what condition did Rasulullah say he would grant the captives freedom? If they could read Surah Al-Qalam from memory, if they would promise not to sin, if they could teach 10 Muslims how to read, if they moved to another city and preach the message of Islam. This one is it's easier than some of the ones that we just went through, so it's a good chance for you to add up points because it's double the points. Most people got that right, correct? So that was the condition for freeing the captives from wars, was them teaching Muslims how to read. So Squirrels is in the lead. Naveed has dropped to third, but still very close. What is a different title given to Yawm al-Qiyamah, Day of Judgment? Yawm al-Hasra, Yawm al-Ajib, Yawm al-Jannah, Yawm al-Hanif. Yawmul Hasra. That's correct. And more movement on the podium there. Ahmad has moved on to the podium. What concept of judging does Islam accept? Only on the deeds of an individual, only on the character of an individual. Judging anything is forbidden, only on what we think we know of a person. So once again, I'm reading out the possible answers for anyone it may help. Don't wait for me to read it. Answer it as soon as you see it. Only on the deeds of an individual. That's correct. So you can judge deeds to be poor. So Masak is on fire, as you can see there, flying into first. Who said, whoever scorns a believer for a sin he has committed does not die except that he commits that sin himself? Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi, Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, Imam Hussain alayhi salam, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. So if you're falling off the leaderboard, the way to make that up is to answer quickly, and also to know the correct answer. We're about almost halfway through, so this one you got to start making up that ground. That was the Holy Prophet's hadith, and a lot of people got that wrong, so Masak will stay on top. Podium's relatively the same, but there is lots more movement than some of our previous games, so that's good. What is the largest animal in the world? So we're into some general trivia now. Elephant, giant squid, blue whale, humpback whale. Largest animal in the world. Blue whale, most people got that right. And let's see if there's any change. Oh, we see someone moving into fifth, but the top four are still unmoved. What is an animal that eats plants and meat called? So they eat plants and meat. Carnivore, herbivore, omnivore, pescatarian. Most people got that right. It's an omnivore. Masak still on top. Squirrels, Ahmad, Banin, Atfa, same top 5. In a website browser address, what does www stand for? World Web Way, World Wide Web, World Way Web, World Web Wide Web World. So that was a good question. Got a lot of people some points, but did not affect the leaderboard. So halfway through, this one you got to start making your move. What is the world's biggest island? New Guinea, Greenland, Madagascar, or Great Britain? Correct answer was Greenland, and most people got it right. So yeah, we got a little bit of movement after that question. Question 17 of 30. How many NBA championships did Michael Jordan win? So I think if you were on our 15th of Shab, or sorry, our Wiladat of Imam Hassan game night, you might have seen this already. correct answer is 6. MJ has 6 rings. And Benin firing into top spot. And Ali Toronto moving up into the top 5. Who won the 2020 UEFA Champions League? Bayern Munich, PSG, Real Madrid, Barcelona. Correct answer is Bayern Munich. They beat PSG. And we have a new person in the top 5, Hakima, making a move. 19 of 30. Which is not a Canadian province? Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Manitoba, New Haven. By the way, it goes without saying, but please no Googling. That's correct. Thankfully, most people got that right. And no change. 20 of 30. How many verses does Surah Al-Fatiha contain, including Bismillah? So those who were in the tafsir classes should know this right away. I think people are counting in their heads. The correct answer is 7. And Hakima moving into 4th. What is the biggest threat Surah Nas can protect one from? Also from our tafsir classes. Internal, external, jinn, curses. So which type of threat does it protect from? The biggest one. The correct answer is internal. So it can protect from many threats, but that was the biggest one as mentioned by Shaykh. That was the biggest threat. So Hiham is fired up into the top 4. So a true or false question, less time for this one. Brazil has won the most FIFA World Cups, true or false? Oh, sorry, no, it's the same amount of time. That is true. They have won the most FIFA World Cups. We have 2 people moving up, so it's getting interesting. Another true or false, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the NBA's all-time leading scorer. So it is true, he's the all-time leading scorer by quite a bit. Benin is top spot, Hakima second, ZW moved into the top 5, so lots of movement in today's game. Question 24 of 30, which is not one of the Great Lakes? Superior, Pacific, Ontario, Michigan. So this is question 24 of 30, we're reaching the end. Pacific is not one of the Great Lakes. Benin staying on top, but Zayab moving into the top 5. Question 25 of 30. Times 2, double the points. Which battle did not occur during Imam Ali's caliphate? Safin, Jamal, Uhud, Nahrawan. So which one did not occur during his caliphate? That's correct. Uhud was fought during the time of the Holy Prophet. And we have a new person in third, Zora moving into the top 5. So lots going on. Question 26 of 30. Does Imam Ali alayhi salam fall in the category of drawing people towards himself or repelling? People were drawn to him, people were repelled by him, neither or both. So if you were listening to the Q&A, then this was kind of answered in one of the questions. It's correct. So it sounds like most people were listening during the Q&A. He does both. So lots of movement in the top 5. Benin is not relinquishing first place. We have Hakima in second, ZW in third, Squirrels in fourth, and Ali Toronto in fifth. Question 27 of 30, reaching the end. Another double points one. Gotta make them up here. When due to financial difficulties, Abu Talib could not take care of his children, who raised Imam Ali alayhi salam? Hazrat Hamza, Abbas, Abdul Muttalib, the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's correct. It was the Holy Prophet. Most people got that right. Let's see if it affected the scoreboard. It did. Squirrels back into the podium. 28 of 30. Last 3 questions. Another double points, giving you guys lots of chances here to get back. For how many years did the Holy Prophet preach Islam in Mecca? Ten, 13, 15, 20. Correct. 13 years in Mecca and then 10 years in Medina, approximately. We have a new leader, so good job, Hakima, moving in at the end. Zora's moved into the top 5. Hiham's moved into the top 5. So here we go. We're down to the last 2. What is the highest grossing / selling movie of all time? Avatar, Titanic, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, or Star Wars? There's one more question after this. Avatar is correct. Most people got that right, but not everyone. No change on the leaderboard. So here's the last question. So I'll give you guys a second to get ready. The podium is all still up for grabs. Everything's still pretty close. There's no runaways here. So 3, 2, 1. This question is a classic for our game nights. What is our handle on social media? At Ace Online, at Ace Media, at Ace Social. If you don't know this, you can't win a prize. Just kidding. If you get this wrong, but you're still on the podium, you'll still get your prize. Just don't worry. Ace Online is correct, so make sure you follow, stay up to date, and we'll see now who the winners are. Third place, Zora. Wow, moved into the top 3 on the last question, I think. Second place, Benin. First place, Hakima. So all sisters on the podium. Good job. Thank you for taking part. Those who were on the podium, congratulations. If you registered, we'll be in touch. Those who didn't finish on the podium, we hope you still had fun. We can't all be winners though. So, but thank you for taking part. We hope you had fun. We hope you learned, and we hope you'll join us next time. Just a couple of reminders. We do have the 2 fundraisers going on right now. So if you want to take part in the food drive, or if you want to take part in the fundraiser for Afghanistan, just go to tinyurl.com/Ace Ramadan 2021. If So yeah, sorry. The fundraising information is on your screen there. So if you haven't taken part yet, make sure to do so. It's just a matter of sending an e-transfer. If you have any questions, you can always contact us and we'll try to refer you to the right people. So I do want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We did work hard to put this together, so we appreciate you taking the time to join us. And one of the Mawlid Shaykh did mention was the Munajat of Imam Ali for nights like these. So it is a beautiful dua, and we have Brother Bilal Hashemi to recite it. So I'll just pass it over. And thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma inni as'aluka al-aman yawma la yanfa'u malu wa la banun إلا من أتى الله بقلب سليم وأسألك الأمان يوم يعض الظالم على يديه يقول يا ليتني اتخذت مع الرسول سبيلا وأسألك الأمان يوم يعرف المجرمون بسيماهم فيؤخذ بالنواسي والأقدام وأسألك الأمان يوم لا يجزي ولد عن ولده ولا مولود هو جاز عن والده شيئا إن وعد الله حق وأسألك الأمان يوم لا ينفع الظالمين معذرتهم ولهم اللعنة ولهم سوء الدار وأسألك الأمان يوم لا تملك نفس لنفس شيئا والأمر يومئذ لله
وأسألك الأمان يوم يفر المرء من أخيه وأمه وأبيه وصاحبته وبنيه لكل امرئ منهم يومئذ شأن يغنيه وأسألك الأمان يوم يود المجرم لو يفتدي من عذاب يومئذ ببنيه وصاحبته وأخيه وفصيلته التي تؤويه ومن في الأرض جميعا ثم ينجيه كلا إنها لظى نزاعة للشوى مولاي يا مولاي أنت المولى وأنا العبد وهل يرحم العبد إلا المولى مولاي يا مولاي أنت المالك وأنا المملوك وهل يرحم المملوك إلا المالك مولاي يا مولاي أنت العزيز وأنا الذليل وهل يرحم الذليل إلا العزيز مولاي يا مولاي أنت الخالق وأنا المخلوق وهل يرحم المخلوق إلا الخالق مولاي يا مولاي أنت العظيم وأنا الحقير وهل يرحم الحقير إلا العظيم مولاي يا مولاي أنت القوي وأنا الضعيف وهل يرحم الضعيف إلا القوي مولاي يا مولاي أنت الغني وأنا الفقير وهل يرحم الفقير إلا الغني مولاي يا مولاي أنت المعطي وأنا السائل وهل يرحم السائل إلا المعطي مولاي يا مولاي أنت الحي وأنا الميت وهل يرحم الميت إلا الحي مولاي يا مولاي أنت الباقي وأنا الفاني وهل يرحم الفاني إلا الباقي مولاي يا مولاي أنت الداعم وأنا السائل وهل يرحم السائل إلا الدائم مولاي يا مولاي أنت الرازق وأنا المرزوق وهل يرحم المرزوق إلا الرازق مولاي يا مولاي أنت الجواد وأنا البخيل وهل يرحم البخيل إلا الجواد مولاي يا مولاي أنت المعافي وأنا المبتلى وهل يرحم المبتلى إلا المعافي يا مولاي يا مولاي أنت الكبير وأنا الصغير وهل يرحم الصغير إلا الكبير مولاي يا مولاي أنت الهادي وأنا الضال وهل يرحم الضال إلا الهادي مولاي يا مولاي أنت الرحمن وأنا المرحوم وهل يرحم المرحوم إلا الرحمن مولاي يا مولاي أنت السلطان وأنا الممتهن وهل يرحم الممتهن إلا السلطان مولاي يا مولاي أنت الدليل وأنا المتهير وهل يرحم المتهير إلا الدليل مولاي يا مولاي أنت الغفور وأنا المذنب وهل يرحم المذنب إلا الغفور مولاي يا مولاي أنت الغالب وأنا المغلوب وهل يرحم المغلوب إلا الغالب مولاي يا مولاي أنت الرب وأنا المرغوب وهل يرحم المرغوب إلا الرب مولاي يا مولاي أنت المتكبر وأنا الخاشع وهل يرحم الخاشع إلا المتكبر مولاي يا مولاي ارحمني برحمتك وارض عني بجودك وكرمك وفضلك يا ذا الجود والإحسان والتول والامتنان برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين صلوات.
So that will bring our Wake-a-Thon for this year to a close. Inshallah, next year we can have it in person. Just a note for those who won prizes, we'll be in touch. For those who wrote the tafsir test, once we're done marking it, we'll be in touch to let you know your results and to let you know who won the prizes. And we'll also be announcing that. So if you won any prizes throughout this holy month of Ramadan, we'll be in touch, inshallah. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to Said Makke. Thank you to Shaykh Rastani. Thank you to Mahmoud Jan. Thank you to Bilal Jan. And thank you to all of you for taking part. And once again, congrats to the winners of tonight's game, Sister Hakima, Sister Banin, and Sister Zohra. Congrats and have a good night.